I don't have a lot left to say on step one. You probably thought we were finished with it, but there's a couple of things I want to point out and show you. It says most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. And remember, we read the definition of what the real alcoholic is. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. And we've talked about the twofold nature of the disease of alcoholism. It's both physical and mental. So we are bodily and mentally different from what is known in our society as normal people. You know, we're not normal. Because we're not normal, we can't do some things that normal people can, and we have to do some things that normal people don't have to do, or they do instinctually and don't even realize it, or they do it with some effort because they want to and have no other need to do so other than they want to. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. And the insanity that Bill and the first 100 who wrote this book are talking about there is not the insanity that that we were talking about the last time we met, which was the psychopathic personality, which is correctable. But this is the condition of wet brain, where the alcohol has finally burned up enough brain cells that the person can't ever function again as a normal person, and there's no return from that condition. And as I understand it, there's no return from the condition of death, certainly not to this world as we understand it. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics, and we talked about making a commitment, that admitting we were alcoholics, making a commitment to ourselves to do whatever was necessary to stay sober one day at a time, learn how to put this spiritual remedy that's taught in this book into action in our lives, one day at a time. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. And self-delusion, self-deception, is the bedrock of this disease. There is no item in the foundation that is lower than self-deception or self-delusion. Without it, there is no disease. If I couldn't tell myself lies that I could believe because of the mental condition this disease has put me into, then I would be able to say, I don't want to live my life like that, therefore I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to drink like that anymore, or I'm going to drink like a gentleman, or when I drink a little too much, I'm going to recognize it, I'm going to go home, I'm going to call a cab. You know, I would act like something that I'm not if I wasn't able to self-delude myself. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And there were periods in my drinking career where, for some reason, I could moderate my drinking or confine it to certain hours of the day where it wouldn't cause me any trouble, and that would work for a while. Whatever situation I was needing to deal with would pass or maybe not pass, but I would lose control again, and I would continue on at either my old rate or an accelerated rate. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over a considerable period, we get worse, never better. And You hear a lot of talk around the tables about it being a progressive disease, and we talked about the physical allergy, the craving phenomenon that's discussed in the doctor's opinion, and what medical science knows about it today. And the reason why it is a progressive disease is that the defective liver or defective pancreas that we are born with becomes more defective over time. Because as you all know, when you reach a certain age in life, what is it, 18, 19, I don't even know, and it's not important. The body's functions after that point deteriorate for the rest of your life. I don't have the heart of a 25-year-old because I'm not 25. I'm something more than that. I'm 36. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had all of my hair. I could see without glasses. I could hear pretty much everything that's said. I got to get up my face to hear you now. I had all my teeth. Maybe being sober hadn't been good for me. I don't know. But I have reached the age of metal in Alcoholics Anonymous. My hair's silver, my teeth are gold, and my ass is lead. One day at a time. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet, and this was written in 1939, and still can't make normal drinkers out of us. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they are in that class. By every form of self-deception, and there's that word again, and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exception to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Case closed on that. If you don't like being an alcoholic and you're in early sobriety, don't let it concern you too much. None of us like to admit that we were bodily and mentally different from other people. But over a period of time, if you do the work that's in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, you come to understand what it means and what seemed to be perhaps a handicap or an inconvenience or a lack of justice or fairness. You come to realize how important it is to you. The first thing I am is a human being. Second thing I am, before anything else, is I'm an alcoholic. And as long as I recognize the order of things that I am, I don't have a whole lot of problems that I have to deal with. My life has to be based upon doing what I need to do. Number one, as a human being. Number two, as an alcoholic. And that requires me to do some things that other people don't have to do. And I've learned to enjoy those things. And I've learned to enjoy the life that it has given me. And it's all available here for us and anyone who comes to join us. I want to do a little scientific thing here to explain some things that happened to us in early sobriety. I've been dragging this this piece of paper around with me to draw a picture on since I started this, and I'm just now getting to it in the 4th week. My daughter controls all the magic markers in our house. She's 7 years old. And she consented to let me have one, but it was a color of her choice. So I'm going to do this in purple. She had 2 of them. And she wouldn't be too badly injured if I didn't bring it back. If you would help me to make sure that I had it in my pocket when I leave tonight, I'd be most grateful, so I don't have to buy another box of mixed colors. Let's turn to page Roman numeral XXVI 26. Men and women, down at the bottom paragraph on XXVI. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity or without harm. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. And I should have made this announcement a long time ago that these books are written in the masculine gender, and I know some of you ladies sometimes have some problems with that, and I understand, but you read in there whatever you need to read in there, and whenever I remember to be sensitive, I'll say men and women, or so I don't want anybody to feel like they're being left out here because of gender. This little experiment, I like to ask somebody what their body temperature is. And I was talking to a girl once, and I said, "What's your body temperature?" And she said, "Well, on the 15th of the month, it's 98.0. Hold it. So I'm going to ask somebody what their body temperature, but it's going to be a man. Tony, what's your body temperature?
98.86. Yeah. 98.6.
It's 98.6. Very good, Tony.
He needed help. Thanks, Joe.
How do you know it's 98.6?
I'm guessing. Because Joe told me.
Well, let me ask Joe. How do you know Tony's temperature is 98.6? Well, what's yours?
I don't know. Probably 98.6.
Why would you say it's probably 98.6?
Because I've heard that's what normal is, but I'm not normal, so I don't know.
Well, if it wasn't 98.6, do you think you'd be able to tell it wasn't?
If I had a thermometer. No?
Extremes, Joe, extremes.
You sure you don't want to ask me?
Extremes? Yeah.
I apologize.
Don't ask me, because mine's doesn't run normal.
Oh, hell with y'all. Most people would say, well, my temperature is 98.6, and I know because there's nothing wrong. I feel okay. You're a bunch of goofballs.
You're right.
So if you are running a temperature, you know something's wrong. When you're not running a temperature, you're not even aware that you have a body temperature, much less what it is. It never occurs to you. So we've got this line all the way across here at 98.6, which is normal body temperature. I'm sorry some of you may not be able to see here, but I'll hold this up when I get through. It says men and women drink essentially, down where we started, at the bottom of XXVI, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And Bill, in step 7, indicates that we have something of a mental addiction to excitement, anxiety, and depression. In this book, the doctor says, down at the bottom sentence, they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol, and what it produced in me was I felt okay. And that's what we say that when we, that's what we mean when we say alcohol worked. It made me feel okay. It took away the restlessness, the irritability, the discontentment. It took away the anxiety and the depression, and it made me feel excited. It made me feel okay. After a while, when we say alcohol stops working, it no longer does that for me. What it does for me, it gives me anxiety and depression. It not only causes it, but it magnifies it. It doesn't take it away. It's the source of it. And then when I don't have it, I experience it in even greater magnitude. And it takes me right back into the bottle. And here's, if at the top of this graph we have what we would call euphoria, and down at the bottom, depression, what we have in the middle is anxiety, big ball of anxiety right in the middle here, because we know when we get up here to euphoria that it isn't going to last, because we've never had it last before. We know when it goes up there, we're going to crash. And when we crash, we know it's going to be that way forever. That there's no way out of the mess now. So, what was happening to us before we ever started to drink, and what happens to us while we drink, and what happens to us when we get sober is this, and it's called the roller coaster, or the yo-yos, or whatever. You hear a lot of different things. You go up and down. You go up to euphoria, and the higher you go, the deeper you go. And what you're trying to do all the time is the same thing that you were trying to do. What you're trying to do in early sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous was the same thing that you were trying to do with alcohol. You're trying to find this line that makes you feel normal. And so we yo-yo back and forth for a while. You get up there and you say, oh, thank God, it's over. I love God, I love myself, and I love everybody. And it's going to be this way forever. I finally found the secret. Oh shit, I think I'll blow my brains out. It happens that quick. I remember it well. And I thought there's something wrong with me. Well, there really wasn't. What was wrong with me was what was wrong with me. Just as there are symptoms of getting sick, so are there symptoms of getting well. And I think one of the most distressing things in Alcoholics Anonymous is the lack of 6-month birthdays we have. I don't know how many people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and never get 6 months. I don't know how many people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and get 6 months and never get a year. You know, and this is one of the primary reasons, is that this is a phenomenon of getting well, and we think that something ain't working for us in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you've got to ignore it. You've got to grit your teeth. You got to suck up your guts. You got to let it pass. You got to have hope. If you've got the courage to stand the pain of leading an alcoholic's life, then you've got the courage to learn how to live sober. If you will pay the price and stand the pain of learning how to live sober, that pain will go away. If you don't, and you go insane and you go back and drink, that pain never goes away. That's forever until death do you part. Because it never gets any better, it only gets worse. What happens is that after a while, we get down here and we start squiggling around pretty close to that line, and we get on it, and now we've got something that we have never had in our entire life. We feel normal. We are no longer going up and down between euphoria and depression. We are no longer consumed by anxiety. And you want to know something? Being normal is boring. Because I had never felt this before. I thought, this ain't worth it. If being sober is boring, this isn't what I wanted. So what do? I manufacture circumstances that will create excitement, anxiety, and depression, and somewhere in between 18 to 36 months, I take off again. It is a totally natural thing. It's called the 2-year crazies, and everybody pretty much suffers from them. Lloyd denies it. I think he's lying. But my point is simply this. If you feel like this, don't worry about it. I'm not telling you to have fun with it, but don't worry about it. Have some hope that it'll go away, because it will. If you just keep coming back and you'll do the work. And for God's sakes, whatever you do, don't drink if your ass falls off. Because it isn't any fun sobering up again. And not everybody is lucky enough to sober up again. You get as many chances in life as you need until you run out of them. And that's the unknown. Make the most of the chance you've got right now. And don't get ambushed just because you don't feel right. Because you're not supposed to feel right yet. Let's go to page 43. Bottom paragraph. By the time Bill got up to here, he'd been flailing away for 43 pages. Plus the doctor's opinion and the foreword to the first edition. And he says, I'm not sure that I've made the point I wanted to make. And he says, I'm not sure that if I have made the point I wanted to make, that anybody is going to understand it. So he says, hey, dumb shit. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. And that brings us to step 2. Step 2 is probably, in my opinion, probably because of my personal experience, not only the hardest one there is to understand, but it's the hardest one to be taught. I don't know that it can be taught. It's something that happens inside. There's some information, perhaps, that can make whatever happens inside a little easier to happen, but it's not an intellectual thing. I almost died coming to believe. I was willing to admit that I was an alcoholic. I was not willing to admit that what I was doing wasn't working. I was willing to admit a whole lot of things. But I said, when I come to believe, I will do what you people are doing, but until I believe it, I can't do it. So I almost lost my life coming to believe. If you do that, it makes it real easy, come to believe. But that's not required. I'm going to be working out of both the big book and the 12 and 12. A little editorial comment. I'd rather work out of the big book, but there are so many step meetings in the St. Louis area that I like to go through the 12 and 12 and related to the big book where the instructions are. The essays are pretty good for what they deal with, which are kind of fragmented comments, but they are not the instructions. Most people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and go to step meetings and think they're learning how to work the steps, and they're not. We aren't. You know, it's better than nothing, but you're not learning the directions. I want to go back to forward to the first edition, Roman numeral X, 3I. This was the foreword. The first edition was which was written in 1939. It says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." And up until that time, it was seemingly a hopeless state of mind and body because there had never been any success on any kind of large-scale basis of helping alcoholics to live sober, either medically or spiritually or any other way. It says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. That's why this book was written, so we could learn what the others had done in order to live sober one day at a time. It is the purpose of this book. Go over page 44. I was lucky enough to have a sponsor that who believed that the only way that I would recover from the disease of alcoholism was if I read on a daily basis the chapter to the agnostics and appendix 2 titled Spiritual Experience. And he insisted that I do that. And I read it and I read it and I read it and never got a goddamn thing out of it. And I finally got another sponsor that didn't require me to do that. And after I wised up a little bit, I went back and I started reading chapter 4, We Agnostics, and appendix 2, Spiritual Experience. I said, now I understand. And I went back and I apologized to that man. that in the preceding chapters you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. That be the case, where am I? That be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And it tells me over and over in this book that I either have to go on the way I am, or I have to accept and seek the spiritual remedy that's in this book. You know, and Father Martin on one of his films says that Alcoholics Anonymous isn't for everybody, but it does the most good for the most people. You know, and that there are other ways, perhaps, to recover from the disease if you've got the money to do it, or some other means, either spiritually or intellectually. But I had tried everything else, and this was my last chance, this spiritual remedy. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And here it is. To be doomed to an alcoholic death, or to live on a spiritual basis, are not always easy alternatives to face. You know, so if you say, I can't do that, or how do you do that, or whatever your excuse is, just recognize these aren't all easy alternatives to face. You know, I made the decision in my life that I'd drink myself to death. I knew I wasn't. I didn't care. I made that decision, and something happened, and I made the decision to come here and to sober up. But I know what it is to have to make this decision and to make the wrong one, because I've done it. I got another chance, so, and I was able to make the right decision. But it's not easy. You know, if you don't know if you want to do these things, if you don't think these things will work, if you don't think this, if you don't think that, don't worry about it. What your feelings, what most of us have felt. It's not easy to make these decisions. But just recognize that there's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that have made the decision to live in our life on a spiritual basis. And they've built a life on an unshakable foundation where they can live sober and happily and usefully whole. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics, but after a while we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I knew and believed a whole lot of neat shit. It just didn't work. You know, I couldn't get any results out of it that were satisfactory to me or anybody else. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So all these things that I knew and I believed and that I was trying to do failed me utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. You know, I had no power in my life. Other things were exerting power over me. Alcohol and other people and situations and institutions. And I had no power to influence the course of my own life. We had to find a power by which we could live and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. The main purpose of the book, in the foreword of the first edition, is to show precisely how the first 100 recovered. Let's see, where'd I go? Okay, the main purpose was to show precisely. The main object of this book is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem, which is, I don't know about you, but what I've been talking about me is that I am a mental defective and an emotional cripple. I don't know what's wrong with you. That's what's wrong with me. And like we talked once before, the physical allergy that I have to alcohol really doesn't make any difference as long as I don't take the first drink. It has absolutely no effect unless I take the first drink. Why do I take the first drink? It is because I am a mental defective and an emotional cripple. And this says a power greater than myself will solve my problem. And I think when people are mentally defective and they're emotionally crippled, I think that's called insanity. And that's what step 2 talks about. It says that if I come to believe a power greater than myself and restore me to sanity, then I can do some other things in this program. What I'd like to give you a short definition of what insanity is. You know, we talked about psychopathic personality, and there's some other things in the doctor's opinion that we didn't talk about, but insanity is an inability to manage my affairs and perform my social duties, and without recognition of my illness.
Can you say that again?
Real slow, real slow.
It's an inability to manage my affairs and perform my social duties. And without recognition of my illness. Everybody get that? That's right.
Is that on the page or?
No. No, that's not in the book. So, once again, without recognition of my illness, self-delusion, self-deception is the bedrock of the disease. It's not a permanent thing. I can correct it. I can correct this thing that's called denial, self-delusion. You know, I don't know if any of you have ever had an occasion to visit a mental institution, but it's not unusual to go to a mental institution to visit someone who happens to be in there, and a guy walks up and strikes up a conversation with you and said, "Would you like my autograph?" Well, yeah. I said, "Well, I thought you would. You know, I'm Abraham Lincoln." I said, "Oh, come on, pal. Abraham Lincoln was 6'4". You're 5'4". You're a lot shorter, and he wasn't fat. He was slim, and he had a beard and warts on his face." He says, "Well, you have seen a bad likeness of me, for I am, in fact, Abraham Lincoln." He doesn't know any different, you know. The guy's in there and he thinks he's a moose, he's a moose. You know, if you tell him Oh man, you're not a moose. He's the hell I'm not. Get away or I'll ram the hell out of you. He has no recognition of his illness.
Pause.
He can't be convinced that he's not a moose. He can't be convinced he's not Abraham Lincoln.
Pause.
I have to come to recognize what illness I suffer from and what that means. I've got to know what it means to be an alcoholic before I can recognize my illness and get some incentive to start to deal with it. Let's go to page 25 and 12 and 12. I'm gonna try and read this whole thing. I've got about
45 minutes? No, 55.
25 minutes.
45.
Tony says I've got 45 minutes and I might take it. Step 2 is about open-mindedness. I got to open my mind to some things that I have closed it to previously, and I talked 2 weeks ago about how I have to turn loose of old ideas. Some of us tried to hold on to old ideas and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. I have to turn loose of these old ideas. I've got to wipe the blackboard clean and start getting some new stuff up there because the old stuff was killing me. It says the moment they read step 2, most AA newcomers are confronted with the dilemma, sometimes a serious one. How often have we heard them cry out, "Look what you have done to us. You have convinced us that we are alcoholics and that our lives are unmanageable. Having reduced us to a state of absolute helplessness, you now declare that none but a higher power can remove our obsession. Some of us won't believe in God, others can't, and still others who do believe that God exists have no faith whatever he will perform the miracle. Yes, you've got us over the barrel all right, but where do we go from here?" Let's look first at the case of the one who says he won't believe, the belligerent one. He is in a state of mind which can be described only as savage. His whole philosophy of life, in which he so gloried, is threatened. It's bad enough to think he thinks to admit alcohol has him down for keeps. But now, still smarting from that admission, he is faced with something really impossible. How he does cherish the thought that man, risen so majestically from a single cell in the primordial ooze, is the spearhead of evolution and therefore the only God that his universe knows. Must he renounce all this to save himself? At this juncture, his AA sponsor usually laughs. This, the newcomer thinks, is just about the last straw. This is the beginning of the end, and so it is. The beginning of the end of his old life and the beginning of his emergence into a new one. His sponsor probably says, "Take it easy. The hoop you have to jump through is a lot wider than you think. At least I've found it so." So did a friend of mine who was a one-time vice president of the American Atheist Society, but he got through with room to spare. "Well," says the newcomer, "I know you're telling me the truth, but it's no doubt a fact that AA is full of people who once believed as I do. But just how, in these circumstances, does a fellow take it easy? That's what I want to know." That, agrees the sponsor, is a very good question indeed. I think I can tell you exactly how to relax. You won't have to work at it very hard either. Listen, if you will, to these 3 statements. And Bill's trying to give us a little help, trying to find this thing inside of us that will allow us to take step 2. Says first, Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand that you believe anything. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. There's some disagreement over that, but nevertheless, here it is in the book. And we don't require anybody to believe anything. Just isn't there. Not only there are no police powers in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, there's nobody that can throw you out for what you say or what you do. You're entitled to be here. Doesn't make any difference. So don't be concerned about they're going to make me believe something. Second, to get sober and stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. Looking back, I find that I took it piecemeal myself. And I have to tell you the truth, I don't know what that means. I don't know. Maybe you do. You know, some things in this book are clear to me and others aren't. This one thing, I don't know how you take it piecemeal. Maybe you can, I couldn't. Third, all you really need is a truly open mind. Just resign from the debating society and quit bothering yourself with such deep questions as to whether it was the hen or the egg that came first. And this is the part that Tony likes. I try not to use too much profanity when I talk in front of groups or when I'm at a meeting. Sometimes specific words serve specific purposes. It says, just resign from the debating society. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a debating society. Nobody really cares what you believe. Keep it to yourself. You're in here to learn something else. It's not a debating society. I sponsor a lot of people, or I have sponsored a lot of people over the years, and I don't debate with anybody on any subject in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. We talk about what the books say. I don't care what they think about it. It makes no difference. What makes a difference is that they still think enough about it that they want to tell me about it. And that's the problem. Because what they want to tell me about that they believe is what's wrong with them. Because it ain't working. Again, I say all you need is an open mind. The sponsor continues, take, for example, my own case. I had a scientific schooling. Naturally, I've respected, venerated, even worshipped science. As a matter of fact, I still do, all except the worship part. Time after time, my instructors held up to me the basic principle of all scientific progress, search and research. Again and again, always with the open mind. When I first looked at AA, my reaction was just like yours. This AA business I thought is totally unscientific. This I can't swallow. I simply won't consider such nonsense. And if you remember, I think it was in the first week, I talked about how spiritual matters could be proved using scientific methodology if you would just open your eyes to the evidence. It is a different kind of evidence that you have to start looking for in your life to prove spiritual matters. It isn't physical evidence. It is evidence that you can feel inside. It's evidence that you can see by the different results that you're getting. And Alcoholics Anonymous is not about believing in God. It makes absolutely no difference. What Alcoholics Anonymous is about is putting God into my life. If I will act like I am being told to act, then I will believe what I need to believe in order to live my life sober one day at a time. And I don't have to worry about what I believe. Then I woke up. I had to admit that AA showed prodigious results. I saw that my attitude regarding these had been anything but scientific. It wasn't AA that had the closed mind, it was me. The minute I stopped arguing, I could begin to see and feel. Right there, step 2, gently and very gradually began to infiltrate my life. There it is again. AA is not a debating society. It says, the minute I stopped arguing. And this is the part that Tony likes so much. The only way that I know to tell somebody how to take step 2 is shut the fuck up and listen. And that is not only with the lips, but that's up in the head too. I can't say upon what occasion or upon what day I came to believe in a power greater than myself, but I can't either, except that I know it was as a result of starting to look for evidence. As I got sufficient evidential matter stored up here, I did this, I got a different result. I did what they said, and I could feel the difference. When I got enough of that kind of evidence, then I came to believe at a deeper level than I had previously. But I certainly have that belief now. To acquire it, I had only to stop fighting. And there it is again, shut up! I had only to stop fighting and practice the rest of AA's program as enthusiastically as I could. And I'm not sure how enthusiastically I can do anything, so I edited my book so that I could understand it. And my book reads, to acquire it, I had only to stop fighting and practice the rest of AA's programs as enthusiastically as I drank. That gave me some mileposts. I drank every day. I drank as much as I could. That's what I decided I needed to do in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I needed to do as much as I could every day. So that's the way I drank. This is only one man's opinion based on his own experience, of course. I must quickly assure you that AAs tread innumerable paths in their quest for faith. If you don't care for the one I've suggested, you'll be sure to discover one that suits if only you look and listen. Shut up and listen. Many a man like you has begun to solve the problem by the method of substitution. You can, if you wish, make AA itself your higher power. Here are a very large group of people who have solved their alcohol problem. Here's a very large group. In this respect, they are certainly a power greater than you, who have not even come close to a solution. Surely you can have faith in them. And I think in one degree or another, that's what happens to us all. You know, I came in here and I didn't think this thing would work. Then I began to suspect that it might work. And then I hoped like hell it would work. And then I finally knew it would work. Even this minimum of faith will be enough. You will find many members who have crossed the threshold just this way. All of them will tell you that once across, their faith broadened and deepened. Relieved of the alcohol obsession, their lives unaccountably transformed. They came to believe in a higher power. And most of them began to talk of God. I want to go back to the big book here a minute and take a look at what the directions are in there. On page 49, I like this, and I like to point it out because this was me, because I was one of those that wouldn't shut up and listen. Down, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom of the first paragraph there, it says, we read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Where our contention's true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. And that's what I believed when I got here. I didn't think that life meant anything. I didn't value my life. I didn't value your life. And I knew it was going to go on. And that was what made me the maddest, that there wasn't any stopping it. It was just proceeding nowhere. And I had to go along for the ride. But these specific instructions in here, back on page 47, in that middle paragraph, it says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So the first suggestion here is just say, am I willing to believe? Am I willing to give up what I think I believe and open my mind to some other possibilities? Over on page 53, he repeats the same message in a little bit stronger terms. And Bill does this throughout the book. He throws out the little bait, and as soon as you nibble on it a little bit, you discover there's a hook in it. In that middle paragraph on page 53, it says, when we became alcoholic, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? And that's a clear-cut black and white choice. And I wasn't able to make that choice for a long, long time. But I finally understood after I got enough of this evidence in my life to feel and see that I could make the choice. It says God is everything, and everything is all-inclusive and excludes nothing, or else he is nothing. Nothing excludes everything. It is absence. It is zero. It is void. It is nil. It is a black and white choice. Either he's everything or he is nothing. And it doesn't make any difference what I believe. Just am I willing to gather this evidence and stop worrying about what I believe? Most of us come to Alcoholics Anonymous with some religious training, either in childhood or throughout our lives, and somehow we got steered wrong on that because of our thinking problems. because our thinking process just sometimes seems to make things come out backwards. And I had to disabuse myself of all these misconceptions I had as a result of my early religious training, which was neither good nor bad. I make no judgment on it. I assess or assign no blame. It's just I didn't hear it, I didn't use it right, something went wrong. I wasn't harmed intentionally. It's just it got scrambled in my brain and it didn't work. And back in the 12 and 12 on page 28, there's Bill describes 4 types of people that come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's important perhaps for everybody to identify where they fall, and you can fall in one or more of the 4. It seems I did, I think, and that gives you an indication of what kind of problem you've got to overcome in your thinking in order to get an open mind. It's also useful when you're sponsoring people to have those your sponsees try to identify themselves, see what their problems are in their belief system that they have to get rid of. It says, consider, on page 28, consider next the plight of those who once had faith but had lost it. There will be those who have drifted into indifference, those filled with self-sufficiency who have cut themselves off, those who have become prejudiced against religion, and those who are downright defiant because God has failed to fulfill their demands. And we're going to talk about demands a little later on. Can AA experience tell all these they may still find a faith that works? Sometimes AA comes harder, and this is the first kind. Sometimes AA comes harder to those who have lost or rejected faith than those who never had any faith at all, or they think they have tried faith and found it wanting. And I agree with this in sponsoring other people that have had a lot of religious practices throughout their life and have lost their faith. It's very difficult for them to find it again, to find what we have here in Alcoholics Anonymous and make it work. Since both ways have they have tried the way of faith and the way of no faith. Since both ways have proved bitterly disappointing, they have concluded there is no place whatever for them to go. The roadblocks of indifference, fancied self-sufficiency, prejudice, and defiance often prove more solid and formidable for these people than any erected by the unconvinced agnostic or even the militant atheist. Religion says the existence of God can be proved. The agnostic says it can't be proved. And the atheist claims proof of the non-existence of God. So there's some definitions there that you might want to get familiar with so that you'll know what you're talking about when that subject comes up. Obviously, the dilemma of the wanderer from faith is that of profound confusion. Would you fill that up, Tony? Sure. He thinks himself lost to the comfort of any conviction at all. He cannot attain in even a small degree the assurance of the believer, the agnostic, or the atheist. He is the bewildered one. Any number of AAs can say to the drifter, yes, we were diverted from our childhood faith too. The overconfidence of youth was too much for us. Of course, we were glad that good home and religious training had given us certain values. We were still sure that we ought to be fairly honest, tolerant, and just, that we ought to be ambitious and hard-working. We became convinced that such simple rules of fair play and decency would be enough. As material success founded upon no more than these ordinary attributes began to come to us, we felt we were winning at the game of life. This was exhilarating, and it made us happy. Why should we be bothered with theological abstractions and religious duties, or with the state of our souls here or hereafter? The here and now was good enough for us. The will to win would carry us through. But then alcohol began to have its way with us. Finally, when all our scorecards read 0 and we saw that one more strike would put us out of the game forever, we had to look for our lost faith. It was in AA that we rediscovered it, and so can you. Second type. Now we come to another kind of problem. The intellectually self-sufficient man or woman. To these, many AAs can say, yes, we were, like you, far too smart for our own good. We love to have people call us precocious. Precocious means wise beyond my years. When a 6-year-old child says witty things at cocktail parties, they say he is precocious. We used our education to blow ourselves up into prideful balloons, though we were careful to hide this from others. Secretly, we felt we could float above the rest of the folks on our brain power alone. Scientific progress told us there was nothing man couldn't do. Knowledge was all-powerful. Intellect would conquer nature. Since we were brighter than most folks, or so we thought, the spoils of victory would be ours for the thinking. The God of intellect displaced the God of our fathers. But again, John Barleycorn had other ideas. We who had won so handsomely in a walk turned into all-time losers. We saw we had to reconsider or die. We found many in AA who once thought as we did. They helped us get down to our right size. But by their example, they showed us that humility and intellect could be compatible, provided we placed humility first. When we began to do that, we received the gift of faith, a faith which works. This faith is for you too. And this is probably the one that I identify with more. I thought I was brilliant and everybody else was stupid. And that third kind. Another crowd of AAs says, we were plumb disgusted with religion and all its works. The Bible, we said, was full of nonsense. We could cite it chapter and verse, and we couldn't see the Beatitudes for the begats. In spots, its morality was impossibly good. In others, it seemed impossibly bad. But it was the morality of the religionists themselves that really got us down. We gloated over the hypocrisy, bigotry, and crushing self-righteousness that clung to so many believers, even in their Sunday best. How we loved to shout the damaging fact that millions of the good men of religion were still killing one another off in the name of God. This all meant, of course, that we had substituted negative for positive thinking. After we came to AA, we had to recognize that this trait had been an ego-feeding proposition. In belaboring the sins of some religious people, we could feel superior to all of them. Moreover, we could avoid looking at some of our own shortcomings. Self-righteousness, the very thing that we had contemptuously condemned in others, was our own besetting evil. This phony form of respectability was our undoing so far as faith was concerned, but finally driven to AA, we learned much better. And I was probably some part of this too, as well as type 2. As psychiatrists have often observed, defiance is the outstanding characteristic of an alcoholic. So it's not strange that lots of us have had our day at defying God himself. Sometimes it's because God has not delivered us the good things of life which we specified. As a greedy child makes an impossible list for Santa Claus. More often, though, we had met up with some major calamity, and to our way of thinking, lost out because God deserted us. The girl we wanted to marry had other notions. Oh, God, that if she had only had other notions. Not my present wife. Don't repeat that. We prayed God that she'd change her mind, but she didn't. We prayed for healthy children and were presented with sick ones, or none at all. We prayed for promotions at business, and none came. Loved ones upon whom we heartily depended were taken from us by so-called acts of God. Then we became drunkards and asked God to stop that, but nothing happened. This was the unkindest cut of all. Damn this faith business, we said. When we encountered AA, the fallacy of our defiance was revealed. At no time had we asked what God's will was for us. Instead, we had been telling him what it ought to be. I believe that's called playing God. No man we saw could believe in God and defy him too. Belief meant reliance, not defiance. In AA, we saw the fruits of this belief. Men and women spared from alcohol's final catastrophe. We saw them meet and transcend their other pains and trials. We saw them calmly accept impossible situations, seeking neither to run nor to recriminate. This was not only faith, it was faith that worked under all conditions. We soon concluded that whatever price in humility we must pay, we would pay. A faith that works under all conditions. Number 4. Now let's take the guy full of faith, but still reeking of alcohol. He believes he is devout. His religious observance is scrupulous. He's sure he still believes in God, but suspects that God doesn't believe in him. He takes pledges and more pledges. Following each, he not only drinks again, but acts worse than the last time. Valiantly, he tries to fight alcohol, imploring God's help, but help doesn't come. What then can be the matter? I used to work with a man, he's still drunk. In the time that I knew him, which was probably 5 or 6 years, or from the time I met him until he stopped coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, probably 5 or 6 years. And I lost count on how many times he had been saved. And I lost count of how many times he had told me he had been saved with liquor on his breath. I said, I believe you, Bob, but it ain't working. Clergymen, doctors, friends, and families. The alcoholic who means well and tries hard is a heartbreaking riddle. To most AAs, he is not. There are too many of us who have been just like him and have found the riddle's answer. The answer has to do with the quality of faith rather than its quantity. This has been our blind spot. We suppose we had humility when really we hadn't. We suppose we had been serious about religious practices, when upon honest appraisal we found we had been only superficial. Or going to the other extreme, we had wallowed in emotionalism and had mistaken it for true religious feelings. In both cases, we had been asking something for nothing. The fact was, we really hadn't cleaned house so that the grace of God could enter us and expel the obsession. In no deep or meaningful sense had we ever taken stock ourselves, made amends to those we had harmed, or freely given to any other human being without any demand for reward. We had not even prayed rightly. We had always said, God, grant me my wishes, instead of thy will be done. The love of man and God we understood not at all. Therefore we remained self-deceived, that word again, and so incapable of receiving enough grace to restore us to sanity. And the word grace means unmerited favor. You could do nothing to receive God's grace, which is unmerited favor, other than to seek his will. Few indeed are the practicing alcoholics who have any idea how irrational they are, or seeing their irrationality can bear to face it. Some will be willing to term themselves problem drinkers, but cannot endure the suggestion that they are, in fact, mentally ill. Bill finally gets around to using the words mentally ill. It doesn't occur in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. He tap dances around it and gives all of the symptoms of our mental illness, and even calls us, even says we're suffering from insanity in the second step. But he finally, in step 2 here, says we are mentally ill. They're abetted in this blindness by a word which does not understand the difference between sane drinking and alcoholism. Sanity is defined as soundness of mind, yet no alcoholic soberly analyzing his destructive behavior, whether the destruction fell on the dining room furniture or on his own moral fiber, can claim soundness of mind. Therefore, step 2 is the rallying point for all of us. Whether agnostic, atheist, or former believer, we can stand together on this step. True humility and an open mind can lead us to faith, and every AA meeting is an assurance that God will restore us to sanity if we rightly relate ourselves to Him. And I want to read one more thing in the big book. If I can find it. On page 46. Five lines from the bottom on page 46. For those of us who are worried about this thing, it says, we found that God does not make too hard a terms with those who seek Him, and I seek Him by putting these instructions into action in my life and gathering some spiritual evidence. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. To those who earnestly seek, it is open, we believe, to all men and women. And on page 55, the third paragraph that begins, we finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we had for a friend. And I think that all human beings will agree that and it only depends on what words they use, but I think everybody will agree that we are all searching for spiritual fulfillment. You know, there's a lot of different names and a lot of different ways to go about it. You know, some people say you get spiritual fulfillment through continual sex, you know, and other people have some different ideas. Or spiritual fulfillment is only brought about by multiple Cadillacs, whatever. But this spiritual fulfillment is about feeling good about oneself and being at peace with God and other people in my life. And, you know, maybe those other ways work for those other people, but it doesn't for me. So I've been continually in search of this spiritual fulfillment, and it's odd that distilled liquor is called spirits. Alcohol did something for me that I could not do for myself, which was to make me feel good about me. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but He was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality, and that's in capital letters, the great reality. Whatever this is that you find, and it's not dictated to you. It's as we understood Him. This great reality, this spiritual fulfillment that we find is deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that He may be found, and that's why step 2 can't be taught. You have to come to believe. You have to be convinced. It was so with us. Let's go to page 57. Last sentence in that paragraph that ends at the top of the page. Bill has been talking about one of the early members in Alcoholics Anonymous here, and he had a spiritual awakening